I was watering my roses on the front porch when my daughter called that Tuesday morning. Mom, you and Dad need to sign these papers today. The anniversary trip to the mountains is all planned. The line went dead before I could respond. 23 years I had devoted to raising her, protecting her, believing in her goodness. She hung up like I was some stranger bothering her. I set down the watering can and took a deep breath. The lawyer had warned us about sudden pressure tactics when elderly parents have assets. I smiled slightly. But there was something she didn't know about that day. Something I had quietly prepared for months, just in case. My name is Anna, and I learned that sometimes the people closest to us are the most dangerous. What happened next on that mountain would change everything forever. Those papers she wanted us to sign that Tuesday morning, that was the beginning of everything unraveling. 23 years of devotion, and she hung up on me like I was nothing. But I had been preparing for months, sensing something wasn't right about her sudden interest in our finances. The first memory that floods back is from when Alejandra was 8 years old. I had saved for months to buy her that red bicycle she wanted so desperately. I remember working extra hours tutoring after school, setting aside every spare dollar. When I finally presented it to her on her birthday, she looked at it coldly and said, "Sarah's bike is prettier." Not thank you, not excitement, just that flat, dismissive tone that would become so familiar. I should have recognized the pattern then, but I told myself she was just shy, just different from her brother Ricardo. Ricardo would have thrown his arms around me, probably cried with happiness. He had this warmth that filled every room he entered. When he was 12, I bought him a simple set of drawing pencils because he loved sketching buildings. His face lit up like Christmas morning. He spent the entire evening showing me how each pencil created different shades, planning the house he would design for us someday. "Mom, look at this tower I'm making for you and Dad. You can see the whole valley from up there." His enthusiasm was infectious. That was Ricardo, grateful for everything, planning beautiful futures for all of us. But Alejandra always wanted more, always found flaws, always made me feel like my efforts weren't enough. When she was 16, I worked double shifts for 3 months to pay for her prom dress. She had seen this elaborate blue gown in a shop window, and her eyes actually showed emotion for once. I thought this might be my chance to connect with her. The dress cost $450, more than I made in a week back then. I remember counting and recounting the bills, making sure I had enough. When she tried it on, she looked beautiful, and for a moment I saw what I thought was genuine happiness. But at the prom, she complained to everyone that the dress made her look fat, that other girls had better jewelry, that our car was embarrassing when I dropped her off. I heard about it from other parents for weeks afterward. Alejandra seemed unhappy about something, they would say carefully, not wanting to hurt my feelings. I made excuses for her behavior, convinced myself she was just going through typical teenage struggles. I told Jorge she'll grow out of it. She just needs more time, more patience. The painful number that haunts me most is $18,000. That's what Jorge and I had managed to save over 25 years of marriage for our retirement. Every month, we put aside whatever we could, sometimes $50, sometimes $20, whatever was left after bills and groceries and the kids' needs. We dreamed of maybe buying a small cabin in the mountains, somewhere peaceful where Jorge could have a workshop and I could have a garden. We talked about it on Sunday mornings over coffee, planning which flowers I would plant, which projects Jorge would finally have time to build. Alejandra knew about that money because I had trusted her with the information when she got married. I thought it would be good for her to understand family finances, to see how careful planning and sacrifice could create security. "Mom, you and Dad have worked so hard," she said, holding my hand in what I thought was genuine affection. "I want to make sure you're protected. What if something happens? What if you need medical care? 18,000 won't be enough for the kind of care you deserve. At the time, her concern seemed touching. She offered to help us invest it, to find better returns. She brought articles about elderly couples losing their savings to medical bills, stories about nursing homes that cost more per month than we made. Let me handle the financial planning, she insisted. I've learned about these things through Manuel's business connections. You deserve better than just letting it sit in a savings account, earning nothing. But now I realize she had been calculating that exact number for years, planning how to get her hands on it. $18,000 represented every vacation we didn't take, every restaurant meal we skipped, every small luxury we denied ourselves. And she saw it as her inheritance, her right, something we were selfishly keeping from her by being alive. The manipulation had been so gradual, so carefully orchestrated, that I hadn't recognized it as abuse until much later. After Ricardo died in that hiking accident, though I would learn it wasn't an accident at all, Alejandra changed completely. She became the perfect daughter overnight. She called every day, visited every weekend, brought flowers and homemade meals. Mom, you look tired. Are you sleeping enough? Dad seems stressed about work. Maybe you should both retire early. I interpreted her attentiveness as grief, as her way of processing the loss of her brother. She's finally opening up, I told Jorge. Losing Ricardo has made her realize how important family is. Jorge nodded, but I noticed he seemed uncomfortable around her, always finding excuses to leave the room when she visited. I thought he was just dealing with his own grief differently. She married Manuel 2 years after Ricardo's death, and I was so happy to see her building a life, starting fresh. They had 2 beautiful children, Emma and David, and I threw myself into being the best grandmother I could be. When Alejandra struggled with the babies, I babysat for days at a time. When money was tight, Jorge and I helped with groceries and utility bills. When their car broke down, we lent them ours for weeks while they saved for repairs. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile because I believed we were building something together, creating the kind of close family I had always wanted. Mom, I don't know what we would do without you, Alejandra would say, and those words filled a deep need in my heart. I had failed to connect with her as a child, but maybe I could succeed as she became an adult, as a mother herself. The pattern became clearer when I started paying attention to the timing of her requests. Every expression of love came with a financial need attached. Mom, you're such an amazing grandmother. Emma loves you so much. By the way, we're a little short on the mortgage this month. Or, Dad looks so happy when he's fixing things around our house. Could you lend us money for materials? We'll pay you back as soon as Manuel gets his bonus. We never saw that money again, but Alejandra always had a reasonable explanation. Manuel's bonus was delayed. An unexpected expense came up. They wanted to pay us back properly, with interest, so they were waiting until they could do it right. These explanations sounded logical, even thoughtful, but they always led to the same result: more money flowing from our careful savings into their needs. The requests escalated gradually. First, it was $50 for groceries, then $200 for car repairs, then $500 for medical bills when Emma had pneumonia. Each request came with elaborate justification, detailed explanations of their circumstances, and promises of repayment that never materialized. But they were always accompanied by increased attention and affection, visits that lasted longer, more help with household projects, more expressions of gratitude and love. I began to understand that my daughter's love had a price tag, and I was expected to keep paying it. The turning point came on a quiet Thursday evening in March. Jorge and I were sitting on our front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. We do this most evenings. It's become our ritual, our peaceful time together after decades of marriage. Jorge was whittling a small wooden bird, something he does with his hands when he needs to think. I was reading a book about gardening, planning what vegetables to plant this spring. The phone rang, and it was Alejandra. Mom, we need to talk about something important. Your will is completely outdated. What if something happens to you and Dad? Emma and David need to be protected. You need to update everything immediately and make sure I'm the beneficiary. Ricardo is gone, so legally everything should come to me anyway. The coldness in her voice was unmistakable. No greeting, no asking how we were feeling, no concern for our well-being. Just a direct demand about our money and property. Alejandra, your father and I aren't planning to die anytime soon. We're healthy, we're careful, and our will is adequate for now. Mom, don't be naive. Accidents happen. Look what happened to Ricardo. One day he was here, the next day he was gone. Do you want Emma and David to suffer because you were too stubborn to plan properly? The mention of Ricardo felt like a weapon, designed to trigger my deepest fear and guilt. After I hung up that night, Jorge looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. There was fear in his eyes, but also something that looked like relief. Ana, there's something I need to tell you about the night Ricardo died. Something I should have told you 20 years ago. My blood turned to ice. Jorge had always been honest with me about everything, our finances, his feelings, his concerns about work or the kids. If he had kept a secret about Ricardo's death for 2 decades, it had to be something devastating. Jorge, what are you saying? He set down his whittling and took my hands in his. His palms were sweating, and I could feel him trembling. That night, when Ricardo went hiking with his friends, I followed them. I was worried because the weather looked threatening, and you know how I get protective when the kids are out in the wilderness. I nodded, remembering how Jorge would pace the house whenever Ricardo was late getting home from anywhere. I saw Ricardo and Alejandra arguing near the cliff edge. She was screaming at him about money, about how he was Dad's favorite, about how he got everything, and she got nothing. Ricardo was trying to calm her down, but she was furious about something. Jorge paused, and I realized he was crying, something I had seen maybe 3 times in our entire marriage. Ana, I watched her push him. It wasn't an accident. She put both hands on his back and shoved him as hard as she could. He tried to grab onto her arm as he fell, but she pulled away. She watched him fall, and then she just stood there for a minute before she started screaming for help. The world stopped moving. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my daughter, about my son's death, shattered in that instant. Jorge, why didn't you tell the police? Why didn't you tell me? Because she saw me watching. When the police and paramedics left that night, she came to me and said, Dad, if you tell anyone what you think you saw, you'll lose both your children instead of just one. Ricardo is already gone. Do you want to send me to prison too? Do you want to destroy Mom completely? She was 18 years old, Ana. 18. I was terrified and confused and grief-stricken. I convinced myself maybe I had misunderstood what I saw. But now, 20 years later, with Alejandra demanding control of our finances and pressuring us about inheritance, Jorge's secret made terrible sense. Our daughter hadn't become loving and attentive after Ricardo's death because she was grieving. She had become calculating and manipulative because she had eliminated her competition for our resources, and she was positioning herself to claim everything. That night, Jorge and I didn't sleep at all. We sat at our kitchen table, drinking coffee and talking through every interaction we'd had with Alejandra since Ricardo died. Every loan we'd never gotten back, every emergency that required our financial help, every expression of love that came with a price tag attached. Every time she had isolated us from friends or other family members by creating conflicts or emergencies that required our exclusive attention. She's been planning this for 20 years, Jorge said. She killed Ricardo to eliminate him as competition, and now she's manipulating us to get everything we've worked for. When we're no longer useful, what do you think she'll do to us? I called my sister Sarah the next morning. Sarah had always been skeptical of Alejandra's sudden transformation after Ricardo's death. That girl went from barely speaking to you to calling every day overnight, Sarah had said years ago. People don't change that dramatically unless there's a reason. Sarah lived 3 hours away, but she drove over that same afternoon. When I told her what Jorge had revealed, she wasn't surprised. Ana, I've been waiting for you to see it for 20 years. Remember when Ricardo was saving money for architectural school? Remember how his savings kept disappearing from his room? He kept blaming himself, thinking he was being careless with it, but Alejandra was stealing from him regularly. Sarah had evidence I'd never known about. She had kept records of conversations with Ricardo where he'd confided his suspicions about missing money. She had dates and amounts documented in her diary because she'd been worried about the family dynamics she was observing. Ricardo called me 2 weeks before he died. He said he had confronted Alejandra about the thefts, and she had threatened to hurt him if he told you and Jorge. He was planning to move in with me and transfer to a college near my house. The pattern became undeniable when we laid out all the evidence. Alejandra had been stealing from Ricardo for months before his death. When he threatened to expose her, she murdered him. Then she spent 20 years positioning herself as the perfect daughter, manipulating us into financial dependence while bleeding our savings dry, preparing for the moment when she could claim our house and remaining assets. Sarah helped us contact a lawyer that week. Attorney Jennifer Martinez specialized in elder abuse cases, and she had seen patterns like ours before. Your daughter is using a long-term manipulation strategy that's unfortunately common, she explained. She eliminated a threat to her inheritance, then spent decades establishing herself as your primary support system while systematically draining your resources. Now she's moving to the final phase, which is gaining legal control of your assets. Jennifer outlined a 4-step plan to protect ourselves and document Alejandra's behavior. First, we needed to secure our finances immediately. She helped us move our savings to a new bank account that Alejandra couldn't access. And we changed our will to leave everything to a trust that would benefit Emma and David directly, bypassing Alejandra entirely. Second, we needed to document Alejandra's manipulation and pressure tactics. Jennifer gave us a small recording device that looked like a pen, and she taught us how to save voicemails and text messages as evidence. Every time she contacts you about money or inheritance, you need to record it. Every threat, every manipulation, every pressure tactic needs to be documented. Third, we needed to limit our contact with Alejandra while appearing to comply with her demands. Don't let her know you're suspicious, Jennifer advised. Act normal, but start declining her requests for money. Make excuses, delay, but don't confront her directly until we have enough evidence to take legal action. Fourth, we needed to build a support network that didn't include Alejandra. Sarah moved back to our town and rented an apartment nearby. We reconnected with old friends that Alejandra had subtly encouraged us to avoid. We established relationships with neighbors who could check on us regularly. The plan was working until Alejandra escalated her tactics in response to our new boundaries. When we stopped lending her money and delayed signing the will changes she demanded, she became more aggressive. She started showing up at our house unannounced, letting herself in with the key we'd given her years earlier. She would go through our mail, our financial documents, our personal belongings. Mom, I found these bank statements in your desk. Why did you change banks without telling me? I thought we agreed I would help you manage your finances. Her tone was accusing, possessive, like we had betrayed her by making decisions about our own money. Alejandra, we're perfectly capable of managing our own affairs. We've been doing it successfully for 40 years. That's exactly the problem, Mom. You're getting older. Dad's getting forgetful. You need someone younger to make sure you don't make mistakes that could cost you everything. But Jorge wasn't forgetful at all. His memory was sharp, his judgment sound. Alejandra was creating a narrative of incompetence to justify taking control. She began recruiting Manuel to support her arguments. During family dinners, they would tag team us with concerns about our mental fitness, our ability to manage complex financial decisions, our vulnerability to scams and fraud. Mom, just last week you forgot where you put your car keys. What if you forget to pay an important bill? What if someone takes advantage of you? I had put my keys in the wrong purse, something I'd done occasionally for decades, something everyone does sometimes. But Alejandra presented it as evidence of cognitive decline that required immediate intervention. Every normal mistake became proof that we needed her oversight. The manipulation reached its peak when she proposed the anniversary trip to the scenic overlook. Mom, Dad, you've been married for 35 years. That's amazing, and you deserve to celebrate properly. I found this beautiful spot in the mountains where you can see for miles in every direction. We'll pack a picnic, take some photographs, make it a really special day. Jorge and I looked at each other across the dinner table, and I could see the same thought reflected in his eyes. After everything we now knew about Alejandra, after Jorge's revelation about Ricardo's death, this invitation felt like a trap. Sweetheart, that's very thoughtful, but your dad and I prefer celebrating quietly at home. Maybe we could just have a nice dinner at that restaurant we like. Mom, you never do anything special for yourselves. You've spent your whole lives working and sacrificing for other people. You deserve one beautiful day, one perfect celebration. I've already scouted the location. It's absolutely stunning. Emma and David are excited about the picnic, and Manuel is bringing his good camera to take professional photos. The pressure was relentless. Every day for a week, Alejandra called with new details about the trip, new reasons why it would be perfect, new ways to make it impossible for us to refuse without seeming ungrateful or suspicious. She had already bought the food for the picnic. She had already arranged for Manuel to take the day off work. She had already told the children about their special grandparents' celebration. But Jennifer had prepared us for this scenario. If she tries to isolate you for any reason, a trip, a medical appointment, a celebration, that could be the moment she acts. You need to be ready to document everything and protect yourselves. Jorge and I made our own preparations for the anniversary trip. We wrote letters explaining our suspicions and left them with Sarah, to be opened if anything happened to us. We carried the recording device Jennifer had given us. We told our neighbors we would be back by 6 o'clock and asked them to call the police if they didn't hear from us by 7. Most importantly, we had come to terms with the possibility that our daughter, the child I had raised, the baby I had nursed and protected and loved, might actually be planning to kill us for money. The morning of the trip, Alejandra and Manuel arrived at our house with hiking equipment that seemed excessive for a simple picnic. Manuel carried a large backpack filled with rope, climbing gear, and medical supplies. Just being prepared, he explained when Jorge asked about it. Safety first in the mountains. Alejandra was unusually animated, almost manic with excitement. She kept checking her watch, insisting we needed to leave earlier than planned to get the best light for photographs. The sunset from that overlook is incredible, but we have to time it exactly right. Trust me, Mom, this will be the most beautiful celebration you've ever had. During the drive to the mountains, Alejandra and Manuel exchanged glances in the rearview mirror that I caught several times. They were communicating silently, confirming some plan they had made in advance. When I tried to make conversation about the scenery or the weather, their responses were distracted, perfunctory. The hiking trail was more challenging than Alejandra had described. It wasn't a gentle walk to a scenic overlook. It was a steep, rocky climb that left Jorge and me winded and struggling to keep up. Several times, I suggested we turn back, but Alejandra insisted we were almost there, just a little bit farther. Mom, you're going to love this view. It's worth every step, I promise. Dad, here, let me help you with that loose rock. We don't want anyone slipping. But the way she positioned herself behind us on the narrow trail felt threatening rather than helpful. Manuel stayed close too, always ready to steady us, always watching our footing with an intensity that seemed more calculated than caring. When we finally reached the overlook, the view was indeed spectacular. You could see the entire valley spread out below, rolling hills and farmland extending to the horizon. Under different circumstances, it would have been romantic, peaceful, the perfect place for an anniversary celebration. But the overlook was isolated. We had seen no other hikers on the trail, and there was no cell phone service. The cliff dropped off sharply on 3 sides, and the only way down was the narrow path we had climbed. If something happened to us here, it would be easy to make it look like an accident. Alejandra spread out a blanket and began unpacking the picnic she had prepared. The food was elaborate: sandwiches, fruit, cheese, wine, as if she wanted our last meal to be memorable. Mom, Dad, sit right here on the edge so Manuel can get the valley in the background of your pictures. This is going to be such a beautiful photo. Jorge and I sat where she directed, but we kept the recording device running in my purse. If this was going to be our final conversation with our daughter, we wanted it documented. Alejandra, I said carefully, before we take pictures, I want you to know how much your father and I appreciate everything you've done for us over the years. You've been such a devoted daughter, especially since Ricardo died. Mom, don't get all sentimental on me. We have plenty of time to talk after Manuel gets these photos. But something in her expression shifted when I mentioned Ricardo. Her mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating underneath. Manuel positioned himself with the camera, directing us to move closer to the cliff edge for better lighting. Jorge, Ana, can you scoot back just a little bit more? The composition will be perfect if you're right on the edge. That's when I knew for certain what they were planning. The setup was too perfect, too carefully orchestrated. The isolated location, the expensive equipment, the insistence on positioning us at the most dangerous spot, the elaborate documentation of what was supposed to look like a loving family celebration. Jorge must have realized it too, because he grabbed my hand and squeezed it 3 times. Our old signal for I love you that we've used for decades when we can't speak freely. Actually, Manuel, let's get a few shots from different angles first, Jorge said, standing up and pulling me with him. Ana, why don't you and Alejandra pose together while I help Manuel with the camera? But Alejandra was done pretending. Sit back down, Dad. We want the photos exactly the way I planned them. Her voice had changed completely. No more artificial sweetness, no more manipulation, just cold command. Alejandra, what's wrong? You seem upset about something. What's wrong is that you two are being stubborn and selfish, just like you always have been. I've spent 20 years taking care of you, helping you, being the perfect daughter, and you still won't trust me with simple financial decisions. You moved your money without telling me. You changed lawyers without consulting me. You're treating me like I'm some kind of threat instead of the person who loves you most. The irony of her words was staggering. She was angry that we were treating her like a threat while she was literally planning to murder us. Jorge kept the camera trained on her, pretending to take pictures while actually recording her confession. Sweetheart, we never said you were a threat. We're just trying to be responsible about our finances." Responsible? Alejandra's voice rose to a shout. "You think it's responsible to let $18,000 sit in a savings account earning nothing when I could invest it properly? You think it's responsible to leave your house to some ridiculous trust instead of to your own daughter who has sacrificed everything to take care of you?" There it was, the confession we needed. She knew exactly how much money we had saved, and she felt entitled to control it. She knew about our new will, which meant she had been going through our private documents. Her entire performance of love and devotion was motivated by financial gain. "Alejandra, that money represents 30 years of our work and sacrifice. It's our security, our independence. We have the right to make our own decisions about it. You had the right to make decisions when you were younger and smarter. But you're old now. You're vulnerable. You need someone to protect you from making mistakes that could cost you everything." She was moving closer as she spoke, backing us toward the cliff edge again. Manuel had stopped pretending to take pictures. He was watching Alejandra with an expression of anticipation, waiting for some signal. "And what about Ricardo?" Jorge asked quietly. "Did Ricardo make mistakes that cost him everything?" Alejandra went completely still. For a moment, the only sound was the wind through the trees and the distant cry of a hawk circling below us. "What are you talking about, Dad?" "I'm talking about the night you pushed your brother off a cliff just like this one. I'm talking about the 20 years I've kept your secret, the 20 years I've watched you manipulate and use your mother and me while knowing you're capable of murder." The mask came off completely then. Alejandra's face transformed into something I had never seen before, pure rage and hatred, with no trace of the daughter I thought I had raised. He deserved what happened to him. He was stealing our inheritance with his college plans and his architecture dreams. He thought he was so special, so smart, so loved. But he was weak, and I was stronger. Just like I'm stronger than both of you now. She lunged at us then, both hands outstretched, intending to push us off the cliff exactly as she had pushed Ricardo 20 years before. But Jorge had been ready for this moment since the day he watched her murder his son. He grabbed her wrists and spun her around so that her momentum carried her toward the edge instead. Manuel rushed to help her, and in the confusion, all four of us went over the cliff together. The fall seemed to last forever. I remember the sensation of weightlessness, the sound of screaming, some of it mine, and the terrible certainty that this was how my life would end. I remember grabbing for Jorge's hand and finding it, holding on to the most important person in my world as we plummeted toward the rocks below. We landed on a narrow ledge about 30 feet down from the top of the cliff. Jorge and I were battered and bleeding, but alive. My left arm was clearly broken, and Jorge was unconscious with a head wound that looked serious. I could taste blood in my mouth, and every breath sent sharp pains through my chest. But we were alive, and Alejandra and Manuel were not moving. For several minutes, I thought they were both dead, and I felt a complex mixture of relief and grief that I still struggle to understand. Relief that the threat to our lives was over, that we would never again have to fear what our daughter might do to us, but also grief for the child I had loved, the grandchildren who would grow up without parents, the dreams I had harbored of somehow fixing our broken family. Then I heard Alejandra moan and saw her trying to sit up. She was injured but conscious, and she was looking around the ledge, assessing our situation with the same calculating expression she had worn while planning our murder. "Mom, Dad, are you okay? This is terrible. What a horrible accident. Thank God we're all alive." She was back in manipulation mode instantly, constructing the narrative that would explain our injuries and their presence on the cliff. I realized then that if we survived this, if rescue came, Alejandra would spin this story to make herself the hero and us the victims of our own carelessness. She would claim she had tried to save us, that we had fallen accidentally, that she and Manuel had risked their lives attempting a rescue. The evidence of her confession, her threats, her planned murder would disappear into a story of family tragedy and heroic devotion. That's when Jorge opened his eyes and whispered the words that saved our lives. "Don't move. Pretend you're dead." I understood immediately. If Alejandra and Manuel believed we had died in the fall, they would reveal their true intentions while planning their cover story. They would incriminate themselves trying to construct an explanation for the police and paramedics. So Jorge and I lay perfectly still on that ledge, controlling our breathing, ignoring the pain of our injuries, and listened to our daughter plan how to get away with our murder. "Manuel, are you hurt badly? Can you climb back up to the trail?" "I think my leg is broken, but I can probably make it." "What about your parents?" "I think they're both dead." "Check their pulse to make sure." I felt Alejandra's fingers on my neck, searching for a heartbeat. I had to concentrate all my energy on staying limp, on not reacting to her touch. "Yeah, they're gone. This is actually perfect. Better than pushing them cleanly. There's no evidence of murder this way. It looks like a hiking accident. Elderly couple gets too close to the edge, loses their footing, tragic fall. We tried to save them but couldn't reach them in time." "What about the inheritance? The will?" "The new will they signed last month leaves everything to me. I made sure of that before we planned this trip. The house, the savings account, everything. Emma and David are provided for, and we can finally get out of debt and start living the way we deserve." They spent 20 minutes on that ledge, planning every detail of how they would report our deaths, how they would explain their own injuries, how they would claim our assets. Every word was being recorded by the device in my purse, every confession preserved as evidence. When we heard the helicopter approaching, Sarah had called for a rescue when we didn't return by our promised time. Alejandra and Manuel quickly coordinated their stories. "Remember, we were trying to take anniversary photos when they got too close to the edge. We heard them scream and tried to grab them, but we were too late. We fell trying to save them. We're devastated, traumatized by watching them die." The paramedics rappelled down to our ledge and immediately began treating our injuries. Jorge and I maintained our unconsciousness as they stabilized us for transport, and we overheard Alejandra giving her statement to the police officers. They were so excited about the anniversary celebration. Mom wanted to get closer to the edge for a better view of the valley. Dad was trying to help her, but they both lost their balance. Manuel and I tried to reach them, but it happened so fast. We fell too, trying to save them. I can't believe they're gone. They were such wonderful parents, and they loved each other so much. Her performance was flawless. Tears, trembling voice, protective concern for Manuel's injuries. If we had actually died, her story would have been completely believable. At the hospital, Alejandra and Manuel maintained their performance while Jorge and I were taken into surgery. The doctors were amazed that we had survived such a significant fall with relatively minor injuries. My broken arm, Jorge's concussion, assorted cuts and bruises that would heal cleanly. But our injuries gave us the perfect opportunity to extend our deception. We remained unconscious in the ICU while Alejandra began the process of claiming our assets. She met with lawyers, insurance agents, and funeral directors. She started making arrangements to sell our house and liquidate our savings. She even began planning our memorial service. Through it all, the nurses kept us informed about her activities. Maria Santos, our ICU nurse, became our ally when I finally revealed that we were conscious and in danger. "Mrs. Johnson, your daughter has been here every day, but something about her behavior doesn't seem right. She asks a lot of questions about your prognosis, about when you might wake up, but she doesn't seem genuinely concerned about your recovery." I managed to whisper to Maria that we needed police protection, that our injuries weren't accidental. Maria was a skilled nurse who had seen family violence before, and she recognized the signs immediately. She contacted Detective Robert Chen, who specialized in elder abuse cases. Detective Chen interviewed us secretly while we maintained the appearance of unconsciousness for Alejandra's visits. We provided him with the recording device from my purse, which contained the entire conversation from the cliff ledge. We gave him Jennifer Martinez's contact information so he could access the evidence we had been gathering for months. The plan was for me to regain consciousness gradually over several days while Jorge remained in his coma, giving Detective Chen time to verify our evidence and prepare arrest warrants. When I finally woke up with Alejandra sitting beside my hospital bed, her first words were not about my recovery or her relief that I was alive. Her first words were, "Mom, I need you to focus and listen carefully. There are some important legal documents that need your signature while Dad is still unconscious." Even believing that we had survived a murder attempt that she had planned and executed, her primary concern was gaining control of our assets. She had brought a briefcase full of papers, insurance claims, property transfers, financial powers of attorney, that would give her immediate access to everything we owned. "Sweetheart, I'm still very confused about what happened. Can you help me understand?" "You and Dad fell from the cliff while we were taking anniversary photos. It was a terrible accident. Manuel and I tried to save you, but we couldn't reach you in time. You're lucky to be alive, Mom. The doctors say your recovery will be long and difficult. That's why you need to let me handle all the financial arrangements." I pretended to be too weak and disoriented to sign anything that day, but Alejandra's pressure was relentless. She visited every few hours with new documents, new urgencies, new reasons why I needed to act immediately. "Mom, the insurance company needs these forms filed within 72 hours, or they won't cover Dad's medical expenses. The mortgage company wants confirmation that someone can make the payments while you're recovering. Your lawyer needs updated power of attorney documents in case Dad doesn't wake up." Each visit was recorded by the police equipment Maria had helped us conceal in my room. Each conversation added to the mountain of evidence documenting Alejandra's manipulation and fraud. The breaking point came when Alejandra brought Emma and David to visit me in the hospital. My grandchildren were crying, confused about why Grandma and Grandpa had been hurt, frightened by the hospital environment and their mother's obvious stress. "Grandma Anna, are you going to die like Uncle Ricardo did?" Emma asked, and I saw Alejandra flinch at the mention of her brother's name. "No, sweetheart, Grandma is going to be fine, but I need to make sure you and David are taken care of if something happens to me." "That's exactly right, Mom," Alejandra interrupted. "The children need security. That's why these legal documents are so important. If you sign them, Emma and David will never have to worry about money or housing or their future." But I had learned to read between the lines of my daughter's manipulation. The documents she wanted me to sign would give her immediate control of our assets, but they contained no protections for Emma and David. The trust fund we had established for the grandchildren would be dissolved, and Alejandra would have no legal obligation to use our estate for their benefit. That night, after visiting hours ended, Detective Chen entered my room with 2 other officers and showed me the arrest warrants they had prepared. The evidence from our recording device, combined with the financial documents Jennifer Martinez had gathered, was more than sufficient to charge Alejandra and Manuel with attempted murder, elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy. "Mrs. Johnson, we have enough evidence to convict them, but it would be helpful if you could get one more clear confession on record. Are you willing to confront your daughter while we record the conversation?" I had been dreading this moment for weeks, but I knew it was necessary. Emma and David deserved to know the truth about their parents. Jorge and I deserved justice for Ricardo's murder and our own attempted murder. Other elderly parents deserved protection from predators like Alejandra and Manuel. The confrontation took place the next morning, when Alejandra arrived for her usual visit with legal documents. Detective Chen and his partner were positioned outside my room, recording everything through equipment Maria had concealed. Alejandra, before I sign anything, I need you to tell me the truth about what happened on that cliff. Mom, I've told you the truth a dozen times. You and Dad fell accidentally while we were taking pictures. Manuel and I tried to save you but couldn't reach you in time. It was a horrible tragedy, but thank God you survived. That's not what I heard while I was lying on that ledge. I heard you and Manuel planning how to explain our deaths to the police. I heard you talking about inheriting our house and savings. I heard you say that our deaths were perfect because there would be no evidence of murder. Alejandra's face went through several rapid changes: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally cold anger. Mom, you were unconscious. You had a serious head injury. Whatever you think you heard was hallucinations caused by trauma. The doctors can explain how brain injuries cause false memories. I also heard you confess to murdering Ricardo 20 years ago. I heard you say that he deserved what happened to him because he was interfering with your inheritance. You're having a psychotic break, Mom. The stress of the accident has damaged your mind. That's exactly why you need to sign these documents and let me take care of everything. You're not capable of making rational decisions right now. But I could see in her eyes that she knew I was telling the truth, that her plans had been exposed, that the 20-year deception was finally over. Alejandra, I'm not signing anything. Jorge and I are changing our will to leave everything to Emma and David directly, in a trust that you can't access. We're also reporting Ricardo's murder to the police, along with your attempt to murder us. That's when she dropped all pretense and revealed the person she had always been underneath the careful manipulation. You stupid old woman. Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for you and Dad? Do you know how hard it's been to pretend to love you for 20 years? Ricardo was weak and selfish, and he would have wasted everything on his ridiculous dreams. You and Dad are old and useless, and you're going to die soon anyway. At least this way, your deaths could have meant something for Emma and David's future. So you admit that you murdered Ricardo and attempted to murder us? I admit that I'm smarter and stronger than any of you ever realized. Ricardo underestimated me, and it cost him his life. You and Dad underestimated me, and it almost cost you yours. But you're still going to sign those documents, Mom, because I have Emma and David, and you'll never see them again if you don't cooperate. That threat against our grandchildren was the final piece of evidence Detective Chen needed. He entered the room immediately with handcuffs and arrest warrants for both Alejandra and Manuel. Alejandra Johnson, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Jorge and Ana Johnson, the murder of Ricardo Johnson, elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. The look on Alejandra's face when she realized she had been caught was something I will never forget. Not remorse or shame or grief for the family she had destroyed, just rage that her carefully constructed plan had failed, that we had been smarter than she expected. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with pure hatred and said, "This isn't over, Mom. I'll get out eventually, and when I do, you'll pay for this betrayal." But it was over. 20 years of manipulation, theft, and fear were finally over. The trial took 8 months to complete, but the evidence was overwhelming. Jorge's recording from the cliff ledge contained clear confessions to both Ricardo's murder and our attempted murder. The financial records Jennifer Martinez had gathered documented years of systematic theft and fraud. The hospital recordings revealed Alejandra's attempts to steal our assets while we were injured and vulnerable. Emma and David were placed in temporary custody with my sister Sarah, while Jorge and I recovered from our injuries. The psychological evaluation revealed that both children had been emotionally abused by Alejandra and Manuel. manipulated into believing that their grandparents were selfish and uncaring for not giving their parents unlimited financial support. It took months of therapy for Emma to understand that her mother's love had always been conditional, dependent on her usefulness in manipulating others. David was younger and adapted more quickly, but both children struggled with nightmares and trust issues that required professional help. Jorge recovered fully from his concussion, though he still has headaches during stressful situations. My broken arm healed cleanly, but I have arthritis in that wrist that reminds me daily of what we survived. We both have scars from the cuts and bruises we sustained in the fall, but the emotional scars run deeper and will probably never heal completely. The most difficult part of the recovery was accepting that the daughter I thought I had raised never actually existed. The loving, attentive, devoted Alejandra who had cared for us after Ricardo's death was a performance, a carefully constructed facade designed to position herself for financial gain. The real Alejandra was someone who could murder her own brother and parents without remorse, who could manipulate children and elderly relatives for money, who could maintain a deception for decades without showing any genuine emotion. Jorge struggled more than I did with the guilt about Ricardo's death. "I should have reported what I saw immediately," he said over and over. "I should have been braver. I should have protected Ricardo and stopped Alejandra before she could hurt anyone else." But I understand why Jorge kept that secret for 20 years. Alejandra was 18 years old when she murdered Ricardo. Legally an adult, but still our child. Jorge was a carpenter, not a trained investigator or psychologist. He was grieving the loss of his son while trying to process the unthinkable reality that his daughter was capable of murder. And Alejandra was skilled at manipulation even then, making Jorge believe that reporting her crime would destroy our entire family. The forgiveness I had to work through was more complex. I had to forgive myself for not recognizing the signs of Alejandra's manipulation sooner. I had to forgive Jorge for keeping Ricardo's murder secret, even though I understood his reasons. And I had to find a way to grieve the daughter I thought I had lost while accepting that she had never really existed. Emma and David helped with that healing process. As they recovered from their own trauma and began to trust us, they shared memories of their parents that revealed the extent of Alejandra and Manuel's dysfunction. Emma remembered being coached to ask for specific gifts from grandparents, being told exactly what to say to make us feel guilty if we didn't provide money when needed. "Mommy used to practice conversations with me," Emma told us during one of our therapy sessions. "She would pretend to be you, Grandma Anna, and I would pretend to be me. And she would teach me how to ask for things in ways that would make you sad if you said no." David remembered being punished for showing affection toward Jorge and me without being instructed to do so. "Daddy said that hugging Grandpa was only for when they needed help with something. He said I wasn't supposed to love you just because I wanted to." These revelations were heartbreaking, but they also helped us understand that we hadn't failed as grandparents or parents. Alejandra and Manuel had actively worked to damage the natural bonds between us and the children, using Emma and David as tools in their manipulation. The legal resolution came when both Alejandra and Manuel were sentenced to 30 years in prison without possibility of parole. The judge called their crimes a systematic campaign of manipulation and violence against the most vulnerable members of their own family, and noted that their lack of remorse indicated a high risk of reoffending if released. Jorge and I were granted full custody of Emma and David, and we used the insurance settlement from our injuries to buy a small house near the ocean, about 2 hours from where we had lived before. The children needed a fresh start, away from the memories and locations associated with their parents' crimes. Emma is now 12 years old and wants to become a teacher, like I was before I retired. She's gentle with younger children and has a natural ability to help others feel safe and valued. David is 10 and loves building things with Jorge in our garage workshop. He has his grandfather's patience and attention to detail, and he's already talking about becoming an engineer or architect, dreams that remind me painfully of Ricardo. Both children know the truth about what their parents did, presented in age-appropriate ways with the help of their therapists. They understand that their parents made choices to hurt people, including them, and that those choices had consequences. They also understand that none of it was their fault, that they are safe now, and that Jorge and I will protect them for as long as we live. The financial investigation revealed that Alejandra and Manuel had stolen over $60,000 from us over the years through fake emergencies, unpaid loans, and forged checks. They had also accumulated significant debt by using our credit and reputation as collateral for loans they never intended to repay. The restitution process recovered about half of what they had stolen, enough to establish college funds for Emma and David. Jorge visited Alejandra in prison once, about 6 months after her sentencing. He needed closure, needed to see if there was any trace of the daughter he had loved, any possibility of redemption or genuine remorse. "She looked right through me," he told me afterward, "like I was a stranger who had inconvenienced her. She asked if I had brought money for her commissary account and wanted to know if we were planning to sell the house so she could have her share of the proceeds. She blamed us for her conviction, said we had manipulated the evidence and turned Emma and David against her. Jorge never visited again. There was nothing left of the person he had hoped to find. I have never visited Alejandra at all, and I never will. My relationship with her ended on that cliff ledge when I heard her confess to murdering Ricardo and planning to murder us. The woman in prison is a stranger who happens to share some DNA with my grandchildren, nothing more. Manuel has written several letters asking for forgiveness and requesting contact with Emma and David. His letters show more remorse than Alejandra has ever expressed, but they also reveal his continued attempts to manipulate the situation. He claims that Alejandra forced him to participate in the murder plot, that he was afraid of her, that he only went along because she threatened to leave him and take the children. But we have recordings of Manuel actively participating in the planning, expressing enthusiasm for claiming our assets, and showing no hesitation about our deaths. His remorse is selective and strategic, designed to improve his chances of parole or early release. Emma and David have decided for themselves that they don't want contact with either parent. "They hurt you and Grandpa Jorge," Emma said simply. "They hurt Uncle Ricardo. They hurt us by lying to us. I don't want people like that in my life." We support the children's decision while keeping the door open for them to change their minds as they grow older and process their trauma more fully. For now, our little family of 4 is healing together, building new traditions and relationships based on honesty, safety, and genuine love. The house by the ocean has become our sanctuary. Jorge built a workshop in the garage where he creates furniture and toys for Emma and David. I started a small garden where we grow vegetables and flowers together, teaching the children about patience and nurturing. We take long walks on the beach every evening, collecting shells and watching sunsets that remind us how beautiful life can be when you're surrounded by people who truly care about each other. On quiet nights, when the children are asleep, and Jorge and I sit on our porch listening to the waves, we sometimes talk about Ricardo and wonder what kind of man he would have become, what kind of uncle he would have been to Emma and David. We include him in our family stories, making sure his grandchildren know about their uncle's kindness, his dreams, his love for architecture and family. We also talk about the signs we missed, the warnings we ignored, the ways that love can blind us to danger within our own families. We've learned that protecting the people we care about sometimes means setting boundaries with the people we love, even when those boundaries cause pain. The anniversary of our fall is approaching next month, and we've decided to mark it not as a day of trauma, but as the day our real lives began. The day we stopped pretending that toxic relationships were normal, that manipulation was love, that family obligations required us to accept abuse. Emma asked me recently why people hurt their own families, and I gave her the most honest answer I could manage. Some people learn how to use love as a weapon, sweetheart. They discover that if they pretend to care about you, they can get you to do things that aren't good for you. But that's not really love at all. That's just selfishness wearing a mask. How do you tell the difference between real love and fake love? Real love wants you to be happy and safe, even when that's not convenient for the person who loves you. Fake love only cares about you when you're useful. Real love protects you from harm. Fake love creates harm and then offers to protect you from the consequences. Jorge and I survived because we learned to recognize the difference between those two kinds of love, and because we found the courage to act on that knowledge, even when it meant accepting painful truths about someone we desperately wanted to trust. Our story isn't unique. Financial abuse of elderly parents is more common than most people realize. Adult children who view their parents' assets as their own inheritance, who manipulate family relationships for monetary gain, who use emotional blackmail to override their parents' autonomy and judgment. But our story also isn't hopeless. Jorge and I proved that it's never too late to set boundaries, never too late to seek help, never too late to choose safety over obligation. Emma and David are learning to build relationships based on genuine connection rather than fear or guilt. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had confronted Alejandra earlier, if we had refused her financial manipulations before she escalated to murder. Would Ricardo still be alive? Would Alejandra have found help for whatever darkness drove her to violence? Would our family have found a way to heal instead of destroy itself? But those questions lead to endless cycles of regret and self-blame that serve no constructive purpose. We made the best decisions we could with the information we had at the time. We survived. We protected Emma and David. We found justice for Ricardo. We built a new life based on truth and genuine love. The boundary I finally established with Alejandra is absolute and permanent. I will not accept manipulation, abuse, or violence in my life, regardless of the family relationship involved. Love does not require me to enable destructive behavior or to sacrifice my safety for someone else's comfort. The consequence Alejandra faces is also absolute and permanent. She lost access to our resources, our support, our forgiveness, and most importantly, her children. Those losses are the direct result of her choices to manipulate, steal, and murder, rather than to build genuine relationships or seek help for her problems. The micro-purpose that drives me now is simple: to give Emma and David the childhood security and unconditional love that Alejandra never learned to value. To show them that families can be sources of strength and joy, rather than fear and exploitation. To teach them to recognize healthy relationships and to have the courage to walk away from unhealthy ones. Every morning when I wake up in our house by the ocean, when I hear Emma and David laughing in their bedrooms, when Jorge brings me coffee and we plan our day together, I remember that I survived for this purpose: to tell the truth about what happened to Ricardo, to protect my grandchildren from the cycle of manipulation that destroyed their parents, to prove that it's possible to start over, even in your 70s, even after losing almost everything. That's the boundary that has replaced all others. I choose life, truth, and genuine love over obligation, secrets, and manipulation. And I will maintain that boundary for as long as I draw breath. Because Emma and David deserve grandparents who understand the difference between love and control, between family and tyranny, between protecting and enabling. The woman who pushed us off that cliff was not my daughter. She was a stranger who had been wearing my daughter's face for 20 years, waiting for the right moment to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. My real daughter if she ever existed at all, died long before Ricardo fell from that other cliff 2 decades ago. But Emma and David are very much alive, and so are Jorge and I. We're building something new together, something honest and safe, and filled with the kind of love that asks for nothing in return except the opportunity to continue growing. That's the only inheritance that really matters, and it's the one thing Alejandra could never steal from us, no matter how carefully she planned or how ruthlessly she executed her schemes. The truth survived. Justice was served. Love conquered manipulation. And every sunrise over our ocean brings new proof that starting over is always possible, no matter how old you are or how much you've lost along the way. Sometimes the hardest lesson is learning that love doesn't always mean safety, even within our own family. And that was today's story of survival, truth, and starting over when everything seemed lost. If you enjoyed hearing it, please subscribe. There are many more stories like this one to share.